this is Little Green Ghouls, and welcome back to Goosebumps Revisited, a series where I break down a classic Goosebumps book and any episode that goes along with it. I will also be telling some of our Goosebumps cliches and classic moments. This week, I'm excited to visit One Day at HorrorLand. This was a book I easily remembered before picking it up again this week. I remembered liking both the book and the episode a lot, and it definitely influenced my own imaginative play as a kid through the creation of my own LEGO HorrorLand rides, so I'm pretty fond of this one on a nostalgic level. This is definitely a book you should check out if you haven't already. It's a Goosebumps classic for a reason, and I'm pretty sure it was voted fan favorite through a Scholastic poll at one point. When looking at the original cover, there's just a lot to enjoy. It gives us an idea of what the HorrorLand horrors themselves look like with their little ram horns. The theme part itself looks foreboding, and the whole vibe just got me excited to see what this one was all about. Color-wise, the cover's a bit one note, but as we've established, I'm always down for pinks and blues. I really like the 2003 version too. The pink slime border brings out the sunset a bit more, and everything just seems a little bit darker, and it adds to the creepy factor. One thing I don't think I've mentioned on these 2000 reprints is that the front taglines are always easier to read, and they look nicer in my opinion. The original ones I think kind of look like last-minute text boxes added on Microsoft Word. The 2008 version is just a little too cute for my taste. Like, the horror looks like you'd enjoy a hug too much, but it's not all bad. I do appreciate that it captures small details from the book, with things like the purple tail. I also like the hint to the bat barn scene, with the little bat popsicle. I just think they could have made his face a bit meaner, but overall it's a nice cover with lots of things to look at. One Day at HorrorLand had the most merchandise so far, and it's easy to see why considering it had such a fun cover and premise. You could essentially decorate a whole office with HorrorLand stuff because we have a gruesome pen, scary stamper, spooky sharpener, a ravenous pencil sharpener, another pencil sharpener without an adjective, and even a Fright on Time alarm clock. There was also a lot of game-based merchandise for One Day at HorrorLand, like the board game itself, a HorrorLand video game cartridge, a Microverse playset, an electric pinball game, a mini claw game, and a Monster Bag figurine found in slime. It also had its own themed lunchbox and thermos, and of course a Pog. Our front tag says, "Enter if you dare," and considering all the amusement park ride-based sign humor in this book, the tagline kind of feels generic in comparison. Our back tag says, "The next ride might be their last." I like the back tag because it's true, and yet to keep hopping on rides anyways. Before we jump into the summary, let's read the blurb on the back. The Morris family got lost trying to find Zoo Garden's theme park, but that's okay, they found another amusement park instead. It's called HorrorLand. In HorrorLand there are no crowds, no lines, and the admission is free. It seems like a pretty cool place. But that was before the heart-stopping ride on the deadly Doom slide, and that terrifying experience in the House of Mirrors, because there's something weird about the rides at HorrorLand. Something a little too creepy. A little too real. Alright, now that that's done with, let's jump into the summary. The book begins with a bit of a tease. Our hero for this book, Lizzie, lets us know that in less than an hour they'll be lying in their coffins, so that's a hook for sure. But for now, Lizzie, her little brother Luke, his friend Clay, and the mom and dad are all loaded into the family Toyota in search of Zoo Garden's theme park. I'm not surprised they're having difficulty finding this theme park because it doesn't exist according to Google. The dad forgot the map, so they're just winging it in hopes of finding the park via road sign, which is a pretty gutsy move. I'm constantly lost without Google Maps, so I don't know how this would even work. Hell, sometimes I'm even lost with Google Maps. It's actually extra gutsy to be driving in hopes of a sign, since apparently they're lost in the desert. Don't mess with deserts, people die out there. The mom and dad begin fighting about the map, and Lizzie lets us know, once they start fighting, they never stop. It's always best to interrupt them quickly before they really get into it, which sounds like a very healthy parent-child dynamic. While the parents are going at it, Luke has declared himself the Mad Pincher, which as you may have guessed involves pinching everybody. This sounds like a lovely car ride. The dad tells everybody to chill out in the back seat with the pinching, and Lizzie lets her dad know that nobody says chill out anymore, which is news to me 25 years into the future. The dad has some anger issues because hearing this causes him to go berserk, with him yelling until he's red in the face. I think this family needs to play the quiet game for a bit or something. The dad continues to freak out, this time at the suggestion of asking for directions, and eventually declares that they're hopelessly lost. This frightens Clay because Luke starts going into how they're gonna die out there in the desert, and that the buzzards will peck out their eyeballs and eat their flesh. We get to add yet another ugly bird child to our roster because it turns out Clay looked a lot like a frightened owl. Bird children are everywhere in Goosebumps. Eventually, the dad pulls over to search for a map, and we get a very awkward and sudden monster attack. As Lizzie looks up, she sees a giant monster lowering itself into the sunroof. This ends up just being an elaborate mechanical billboard. Lizzie lets us know that her parents had been so busy arguing about maps that they didn't even notice they were parked by a massive billboard with moving parts. So with spatial awareness like this, no wonder they're lost. Luke is able to convince the family to ditch the Zoo Garden plans since they're already lost, and with that the family is off to HorrorLand. This park is supposedly 1 mile away according to the billboard, and the family has suddenly gone from being lost in the desert to driving through a forest of enormous trees. I don't think that's how ecosystems work, but what do I know? Maybe in this monsterverse, anything goes. When they pull up to the park, it seems to stretch for miles, and the kids are stoked. I would be too, because a horror-themed park sounds right up my alley. They get even more excited when they see how few cars are in the parking lot, because that just means there'll be shorter lines. Luke channels this excitement into beating on Clay because Luke always had to be punching or pinching somebody. Luke and I would not be friends. I like the sign that says, "The HorrorLand Horrors welcome you to HorrorLand." It cuts a bit too close to horror if you're inarticulate like me. I distinctly remember telling my grandma that a girl at school was a horror in like 5th grade and not getting the response it intended. The family walks to the gate when suddenly their car just straight up explodes out of nowhere behind them. This book is going big with its chapter cliffhangers. After the initial shock wears off, the dad asks the horror at the front booth if he can use a phone, but the horror is like, "Sorry, no phones," and then just keeps repeating, "We'll take care of you," which is not reassuring when it's delivered ominously from the mouth of a monster man. The rest of the family, minus the dad, are somehow able to move past the sudden car explosion fairly quickly after being given free admission to the park and decide to try to enjoy the rest of their day. I think if my car just exploded, I'd be worried about how that gecko would probably be trying to screw me over and how broke I'll be. The first thing they spot is Werewolf Village with a sign saying, "Do not feed the werewolves, if you can help it." They also notice a horror walking around with a human head that bounced up and down, sort of like a yo-yo, which is a great visual. The parents decide to ditch the kids in search of a phone and tell them to meet back here with no time frame given, so I'm sure that won't be an issue. We then get a chapter cliffhanger as a wolf they spotted earlier is suddenly staring them down with red eyes ready to pounce. I didn't have a proper fear of wolves until relatively recently after watching Yellow Jackets and seeing a girl get shredded by one. If you haven't watched Yellow Jackets, start now. It's probably my favorite new show of 2022. The wolf ends up slinking away in an anticlimactic moment, and Lizzie tells them it was probably just a really good robot. We stop to admire a no pinching sign that seems custom built for violent little Luke. They also see some families, but none of them seem to be having a good time. They also pass some black ice cream, which sounds exciting, but it probably ended up being something foul like spider or licorice flavored. We get our first ride with the Doom Slide, which has the tagline, "Will you be the one to slide forever?" It's a bit like Russian roulette where they have 10 slide options, with one being the Doom Slide, probably launched off into nothingness forever I guess. Lizzie chooses slide 3, Luke 2, and Clay goes for 10. The ride sounds pretty fun as you speed down a sliding board into darkness for a long time and then suddenly are plopped out the side of the building. Lizzie and Luke have a good laugh about it until they realize Clay never popped out. They run around the building looking for him for a bit before asking one of the horrors where he went. She shrugs and's like, maybe he chose the Doom Slide. It takes them a chapter, but eventually they realize the best way to locate Clay is by going down the same slide as him. The slide sounds less pleasant this go around, because this time they're launched through nasty cobwebs that burn, and the siblings freak out thinking they've been sliding for way too long. To make matters worse in a chapter cliffhanger, they realize they're fast approaching flames. They launch right through the flames, and shortly after that the ride plops them out right next to Clay. Apparently this slide took him across the entire park. Luke changes his tune and pretends to have loved the ride, while Clay thinks it was a little too scary. On their way to the next ride, they come across a horror who tells them to get away while they can. Luke dismisses this as great acting, but Lizzie's a little freaked out and wants to locate their parents. Instead, they end up going to the House of Mirrors. I've only ever been to one House of Mirrors at a county fair, and once I realized I could just look at the floor to spot the path, the fun was kind of over. However, it was great watching other people just walk straight into the mirrors repeatedly. The tagline for the House of Mirrors is, "Reflect before you enter, no one may ever see you again." This House of Mirrors sounded pretty cool, because it started out as a standard maze of mirrored walls, but it switches into floor and ceiling mirrors too, so it's like walking in a mirrored box. Luke and Clay run ahead and leave Lizzie behind, and she ends up getting lost in there on her own. The boys stop finally moving so Lizzie can catch up with them, only to realize that the maze has added another layer of complexity by having clear glass walls in there too, so now everybody can see each other, but they're still in separate areas of the maze. Lizzie is also very over smashing her face into mirrors and glass walls, and has stopped having fun. To add to the confusion, all three of them suddenly realize they're sealed into their respective rooms with no way out, because the rooms have suddenly turned into sealed glass boxes. I enjoy how much of a mindfuck this would be. The glass walls suddenly begin moving inwards from all sides, and we get a chapter cliffhanger where the kids all realize they're going to be crushed like a compactor at a junkyard. At the last second, the floor gives way, and they are once again sent down a slide and plopped outside. So far, these rides sound pretty awesome. Luke has my mindset, and he's ready for the next ride, but the other two have reservations. Luke assures them that it's a poor business model to kill off your customers, so they'll be okay. Clay is not reassured and wants to know if anybody's actually been scared to death. Luke decides to ask a horror if anybody's ever died at HorrorLand, and he gives a great dad joke by saying only once. Because you only can die once. Nobody's ever died twice at HorrorLand. On their search for their parents, they pass more crying children, and Lizzie remarks she's never seen so many crying kids at an amusement park. She's clearly never been to Disney World because heat plus stressed parents plus long lines equals crying children everywhere. They pass a roller coaster that says out of order, do you dare to ride it anyways? And they make the wise decision to skip that one. They then walk down a forested trail that has a sign that says beware of tree snakes, and make the correct decision to haul ass once they hear angry hissing above them. Once out of the forested trail, they encounter a row of evil-looking statues that possibly start laughing and trying to grab them. Lizzie isn't sure because they took off again before they could find out. They then pass a sign that says, front exit, don't bother, you will never escape. Clay fails to see the humor in that and is ready to get out of this place. So far, I'm really enjoying how detailed Stein is making this book. A lot of time it feels like these books have a ton of padding, but this one's been pretty enjoyable. He makes this park come to life with lots of little details in the setting. I definitely can see how this book made my imagination run wild as a child. The path eventually takes them to Bat Barn, and you have to walk through the barn to keep moving along the path. Lizzie asks, "Are there bats in there?" Which seems like a bit of a silly question given what she's experienced so far. When she steps inside, she realizes it stinks to high hell, and she decides to run through as fast as she can, but the door slams shut and seal them in. Then the bats inside go nuts. This would be an awful experience, but it's great. The bats swirl around the kids, and eventually one gets caught in Lizzie's hair. Luke touches the door and it opens, and the bats magically just disappear, leaving the kids very confused. Luke deduces it must just be special effects, and that brings him peace, but the other two remain unconvinced. They pass a sign that says, "Alligator Pond, feel free to swim here," and spot 4 teenagers actually swimming, which couldn't be me, nope. The kids begin to get a bit more frantic in their search for their parents because now hunger is setting in because they are well past lunchtime. They think they've spotted their parents, but it ends up just being some doppelgangers, and one of the horrors delivers a message from the parents to the kids that just says, "Goodbye." The kids conclude that there's no way their parents would just leave them and that the horror must just be messing with them. They're still a bit frazzled nonetheless. They wander through Vampire Village and past a closed zoo called Monster Zoo that seems to be full of very angry creatures. They then pass Guillotine Museum with the tagline, "Please hold on to your head." This book is full of my favorite kind of Stein humor versus annoying friend group humor. They find themselves at Alligator Pond again after wandering aimlessly in search of their parents. This time we confirm that there really are alligators in there, and we get a chapter cliffhanger, shoulder scare mashup as Lizzie is suddenly thrust into the pond. Except not really, it's her dad who has her shoulder, and there was no shoving at all. The kids are all relieved and ready to leave HorrorLand, but the parents insist they all go on one ride together because they spent their entire time looking for a phone and their kids. They pass another ride, and this one says free fall, the only bungee jump without a cord, and Lizzie says nope to that immediately. They finally settle on Coffin Cruise, a relaxing float to the grave. This is a ride that stuck with me the most as a kid. The ride starts out pleasant enough with each family member getting their own coffin as they float down the river looking at the sky. Just when Lizzie is starting to enjoy herself, the coffin lid slams shut. That right there would be enough to do me in. Lizzie tries her best to open the lid, but it won't budge. She realizes how hot inside the coffin it is with the stuffy air, and she can hear her mom screaming nearby. The cherry on top, though, is that she suddenly feels spiders crawling around in there with her. This would be such an awful experience. Stein saved the best for last on this one. As Lizzie is becoming aware she can't even move her arms to wipe away the spiders, the coffin lid springs open, and once again there's nothing there. The parents agree that the rides go too far, and everybody is ready to leave HorrorLand at this point. Since their car blew up, they apparently think that the horrors are going to lend them one to get home. They get to the ticket booth at the front, and they realize that every ticket booth is closed, and they can't seem to find anybody to help them. They eventually reach the gate, and they see that they're locked in, and not just a little locked in, but like with a full-on padlock. They contemplate scaling the fence, but it's like 20 feet high. They decide to search for workers, only to turn around and see them all marching towards them in an ominous line. This has the family a bit freaked out. Lizzie finally shouts, "What do you want?" at them, and one of them says, "I want to thank you," which throws Lizzie off and is followed up by a weird-ass but enjoyable twist for appearing on HorrorLand Hidden Camera. So now we have a reality prank show thrown into the mix. I definitely remembered not seeing that coming as a kid. The dad wants to know why he's never heard of this show, and the horror says, "It's on the Monster Channel," and the dad defeatedly says, "Oh, we don't have cable." I don't know why, but that got a good chuckle out of me. The horrors tell them, "Sorry about blowing up your car, but don't worry, we have a new one waiting for you out front." They direct them towards the building and say the real exit is that way. Once inside the building, the door slams shut and it's announced they're on a new show, the HorrorLand Challenge, and they have 1 minute to make it through a monster obstacle course, and this time they're playing for their lives. Shit got weird real quick on this one, and we still have like 20 pages to go. They don't have much time to think, because a monster has already appeared. A disgusting formed creature stepped out towards us. "Oh," I cried out without even realizing it. The size of a gorilla, the monster had huge green eyes, surrounded by thick red fur all over its face. Saliva drooled from its mouth, and as it opened its jaws wider, 2 rows of long fangs slid over its thin purple lips. They escape the first monster, only to come across 2 giant-ass birds that try to eat them too. Once they're done dodging the birds, Lizzie finds herself being attacked by a fur-covered snake. All of this is happening as she races in the dark trying to beat a 1-minute clock. There are just so many things happening at this point. More monsters loomed in front of us. Disgusting yellow lizard-like creatures with dark flicking tongues like bullwhips. A hopping furry ball that roared as it hopped, sharp teeth poking out of its 3 mouths. Hissing snakes, enormous buzzing insects with glowing red eyes, more grunting pig monsters. Then a giant bear-like creature came at us with 2 legs. It tossed back its dark round head and laughed like a hyena as it paw-punched the air. During the last 10 seconds, Lizzie finds herself knocked to the ground by an elephant monster creature. As she's laying there dazed, it starts to crush her with its stinky foot, only for the timer to end before it can fully squish her. Lizzie feels relief briefly before it's announced that 3 out of the 5 players survived, so she's like, "Oh shit, who died?" But actually the horrors just can't count, and it's 5 out of 5 survived. The parents were still under the impression that this is all fake, but Lizzie insists that the monsters were real. Once again, the floor gives way and dumps the family back onto the HorrorLand Plaza. Lizzie bum rushes the HorrorLand host and tries to rip off her mask, only to learn that the horrors are also real monsters. It turns out that the Monster Channel is watched by 2 million monsters all over the world, and their favorite way to say goodbye to contestants is by throwing them in a pond of purple acid. The family is rounded up and lined up by the edge of the pond, and in a chapter cliffhanger, they have to decide whether to jump or be pushed. Lizzie suddenly has an idea and remembers all the no pinching signs in the park. She then pinches the host horror. The horror immediately deflates like a balloon, and the family goes to pinching all the horrors around them. This causes chaos as the horrors try to escape the family. The family is able to make it out the front gate, which is now open, only to remember that their car blew up. This stumps them briefly until they decide to try the HorrorLand buses. The bus just so happens to have a key in it and they're able to take off. It wouldn't be Goosebumps without one final twist though, because once they reach their house, a horror slides off the back of the bus. Lizzie thinks it's about to attack, but instead he just offers her free passes for next year. And that's how this one ends. I for sure remembered parts of the episode before revisiting it this week, specifically the scene where Lizzie's in the coffin with the spider, but the rest blurs a bit more, just that there's more game show than in the book. Our most notable actor this week is going to be Jonathan Whittaker, who played the dad, mostly because he's been in so many things, and one of those things is The Expanse, which I loved. The episode eliminates Noah and replaces him with special effects. That gargoyle sounds like one of the demons from 1985's Demons.
I love it.
Yeah, parents, what's a whore?
The HorrorLand horrors welcome you to HorrorLand? What's a horror?
I agree, it's a great costume.
Welcome to HorrorLand.
What a great costume.
Yeah, pretty scary looking.
Thank you.
So that's where the decapitated girl from the intro comes from.
Oh, hello. First time at HorrorLand?
Stay off the guillotine ride. Sharp turns.
No talking.
I want the backstory on the friendly whore.
Ooh, get out! While you still can!
You scared him. That wasn't very nice.
You shouldn't be here! It's not safe!
Crazy mirrors are just so crazy. I actually really liked a lot of this mirror stuff.
Luke, where are you? Luke?
Lizzie! Lizzie! I'm lost!
Just calm down, I'm coming. Just stay where you are.
Lizzie! Is anybody there?
Where's my reflection?
Somebody help me, please! Somebody please help me! Somebody help me, please!
The Monster Punch has some extra flavors added.
Hello? Hi there, folks. You look mighty thirsty. How'd you like a nice monster punch?
This does just look a tad unsafe.
Yo! Lay back and enjoy the ride.
Hey! Just a ride!
It's fun getting to see all the different horror designs.
You haven't gone on all the rides. I want you to stay.
It's kind of interesting that the part 2 drags out the game show aspect so much.
Let's hear it for the Morris family, everybody! Today on HorrorLand Hidden Camera! Bye-bye! That's a wrap. Hey, you guys were terrific. Listen, we have another show coming up. A game show. You're confused. First you find out monsters really do exist, and then you find out we have our own cable channel. It's a shock.
I didn't expect our fashionista to be one of the horrors.
Oh, my.
I don't know what's going on, and it's questionable, but I like it. Boop.
You're not gonna hurt us, are you?
Darling, we're monsters, but we're not monsters.
I support the logic.
It is the Morrises versus the Morrises!
Hey, if it's the Morrises versus the Morrises, how can we lose?
Mom. How can we lose, dear?
This is the weirdest episode so far, aside from old.
Let's watch this important message. Now, for the first time on one CD, greatest monster love songs, over to you. And so much more. 50 monster love hits. Just call 1-700-MONSTER. Hey, Monster Kids. Now you can have hours of fun with your very own human figures. Scare them, smash them, eat them, or just jump up and down on them. Human action figures.
I thought they were gonna get slimed, but then I remembered it isn't Nickelodeon.
Today's raw deal, the Morris kids get a bucket of worms.
Ripper reminds me of Saber from Welcome to Camp Nightmare.
Behind one door is that fabulous sports utility vehicle. Is Ripper, the killer beast.
Whatever happens, we'll face this together.
Like a family. Yeah, like a family-sized dinner.
Hurry! Go, go, go! Hurry, hurry!
These noises are something else. I'm enjoying the car attack. Fuck these birds.
I don't think this is the time to be clowning around.
I am not clowning around. What's wrong with the steering?
The episode in general was pretty different from the book, including the ending.
Will the Morris family ever get out of HorrorLand? Tune in next week to the Monster Channel.
Ooh. Cockroach?
Oh, thank you, darling.
The episode wasn't as enjoyable as I remembered it being. Part 1 is more solid than Part 2, but overall, I thought One Day at HorrorLand, the book, was pretty great. I thought Lizzie was a fine protagonist, and I didn't find Luke to be as obnoxious as the usual younger siblings. He helped drive the plot forward by getting us onto more rides, which was the highlight of the book for me. The rides were creative, and you could tell Stein had a lot of fun thinking up horror twists on classic amusement park rides. The big twist for this book is very out there, and in some ways not really necessary. Like having the horrors be real would be enough, but it was a fun final act anyways. These books are meant to be a mix of scares, humor, and twists for kids, and I think it succeeds in that. I'm gonna give this one 5 out of 5 aquatic coffins. It was pretty easy to see why I liked this one so much as a kid. Okay, now let's move on to our Goosebumps totals. One Day at HorrorLand, despite being a great book, didn't really add much to our totals. There were no It's a Prank Bros, Asshole Victims, It's Only a Dreams, anything notable from the 90s, or anything to add to our vomit count, but it did have a shoulder scare. Our shoulder scare in One Day at HorrorLand was when Lizzie thinks she's about to be launched into the alligator pond, but it ends up just being her dad's hand on her shoulder. This brings our Goosebumps total to 15 shoulder scares. One Day at HorrorLand had a total of 11 chapter cliffhangers, the same as last week actually. The only difference was that these ones were actually pretty enjoyable. This raises our Goosebumps total to 194. The clunky cliffhanger reward for this book goes to chapters 1 to 2, where Lizzie somehow missed that they parked next to an enormous mechanical billboard and thought a monster was crawling into the sunroof. It just felt out of place. Shocker ending. Our big twist to this story was having all the horrors be real, then having the family be on a candid camera show, then placed into their survival monster obstacle course, then having the monsters be deflated by pinching, only for the very final twist on the last page to be a horror offering them free tickets to HorrorLand for next year. This brings our Goosebumps series total to 11. Well, that's it for One Day at Horrorland. I enjoyed this book, and I knew I would going into it, so that was a nice change of pace from our recent revisits. Someone in the comments should explain the HorrorLand series to me that came out somewhat recently, because I'm intrigued. Our next book is Why I'm Afraid of Bees, and I'm pretty sure this is a revisit to our mad scientist trope, but I'm not 100% solid on that. Be sure to let me know what you thought of One Day at Horrorland in the comments. Did you enjoy this one as much as I did? What would your HorrorLand ride creation be? Also, what did you think of my amusement park horror clips this week? Anyways, thanks again for watching, and make sure you subscribe for
The pride. The love.